वेलकम टू द Grewalz show. मैं थोड़ा host Gurinder Singh Grewal. आप सबनु सत श्री अकाल. Today I have the pleasure of having Madam Crombie, Her Worship Bonnie Crombie, Mayor of Mississauga, in my show. Welcome, Miss Crombie.
Sat Sri Akal. Thank you so much for having me, Gurinder Ji. How are you today?
Good. I always like whenever you meet Punjabi people and you say Sat Sri Akal, that's very, very pleasing of yourself. So thank you again for saying that. So Madam Crombie, today you're on our show. It's been a while that we had a chat. Due to COVID, things have gone haywire, and today we have you over into our show through Skype. So we always like to thank Skype for that. Let's start with COVID issues. It's been close to 6 months that COVID has been around us. What's happening at the city of Mississauga as of today due to COVID?
So we always knew once we entered phase 3, we would have an uptick in cases. With the children going back to school, with people going back to work, there would be a greater risk of transmission. So here we are now seeing cases averaging 75 to 110 on average in Peel per day. And we're starting to become very concerned. The average in Mississauga has gone up in the month of September threefold. So that's a pretty big increase. We're now averaging about 50 cases per day. Brampton's a little bit higher still, and Toronto is very high as well. So we're very, very concerned. Now, when I analyze where the transmission is occurring, it is different than in Toronto. Toronto, it's still the young people going to the clubs, going for nightlife, the bars, the restaurants, socializing. In Peel, it's a little bit different. We know that 92% of the cases are from community transmission, households, and workplaces, and it's that little cycle. So we see the young people are still out socializing in small gatherings, backyard parties, hanging out together, wherever they are, at the mall, at the restaurant. There are people's backyards. We're having barbecue parties, dinner parties, and we're feeling a little too relaxed with the rules. So we are spreading it from friend to friend. Then we infect our household. And we know here in Peel, we live in large extended families. That doesn't help. And then we bring it to the workplace. Now, when the workplace is affected, this is easy for us to isolate, to shut down and do the contact tracing. So workplaces, because the type of work that people do here in Peel, we have large facilities, large employers like manufacturing, meat processing, logistics companies, transportation companies, big plants. And so when one person or two get infected, it's very important we shut it down and we isolate for 2 weeks. And this is very controllable. But the amount of transmission in the community that we can't point our finger to is not controllable. We know that it's not coming from the bars and restaurants, yet it is in Toronto. So when you think about it, the Chief Medical Officer of Health in Toronto wants to shut down the bars and restaurants in Toronto. So I have a concern that they'll come here to Port Credit.
So now, Mayor Crombie, when we were talking about restaurants and bars, I know Mississauga has a vast variety of restaurants which are open till pretty late. Is the city itself able to do anything regarding the hours or the operation of any business in Mississauga, or do we have to listen to the Ministry of Health from Ontario government and then plan accordingly?
So that is the point. So the Chief Medical Officer of Health has the ability to shut down 1 or 2 or 3 restaurants where there's a problem, but not the entire industry. That would come from provincial guidelines. Okay. Could I ask the bars and restaurants to close sooner? I could. However, we haven't seen the transmission in bars and restaurants yet here in Mississauga, so we're very hopeful. We have been appealing to people, especially this is a long holiday weekend for Thanksgiving, to please reduce your social gatherings. Reduce your social gatherings to your immediate family and your essential support workers, whether you have a PSW if you're an elderly person, babysitters, etc. The essential people in your life is what we should limit ourselves to stop the spread of the virus. And this is really critical right now. There were days in August that I had 0 new cases, and then 5. per day, and then 15. Suddenly we were at 30 again, and now we're at 50. And this is what we're seeing.
Do you think the big spike came after the schools were reopened with all the students and all the teachers out of their houses?
So it happened in September, yes. But there was a staggered start to the schools, and we don't see many cases in the schools to contribute to this kind of growth in severity in our numbers. It's a general people going back to work, and a general, shall I call it in French word, is malaise. People are more relaxed. They're not listening to the rules. You know, when the summer was warm, they got together. And don't forget, what we're seeing today is a result of 2 and 3 weeks ago.
That's correct.
Because it takes COVID, 2 weeks before you get the symptoms, right? So what we're seeing today is people relaxing, having a backyard barbecue party in their home 2 weeks ago. So now we're asking, the weather's starting to get chillier, and I'm very happy about that. I need people to stay home, and I need them to stop socializing. And this is really critical because now we're seeing higher increased use of our hospitals, more people in ICU and more people entering the hospital because of COVID. Over the summer, especially July and August, it was great. People they were back to doing regular surgeries for people who needed their surgeries done. But now we're seeing COVID cases rising in even the hospitals. So I suspect that the province may implement new measures once again. I mean, we have a concern about banquet halls a little bit because we've seen transmission occurring in weddings. Families come together and, it's our family. We don't need to wear the mask. They're hugging, they're kissing, they're too close. And they forget that, yes, they're family, but this family lives maybe in Markham and you live here in Mississauga, Brampton, and they're carrying the virus and they don't have symptoms. This is the problem. People who don't have symptoms carry the virus. We call it asymptomatic. And that's why we ask everybody wear the face covering, because you may not know it if you're carrying the virus or not. So weddings have been a big source of the carriers, the transmission here in Peel.
So as we have heard all across Canada, there have been mayors who have openly said that banquet halls should be closed. What's your take on that?
Well, we have reduced the capacity numbers in the banquet halls. It was 100 per banquet hall. Actually, it was 100 per room. And now we've reduced it to 50 within the entire banquet hall, notwithstanding what room you're in, what hall you might be in. So we're rolling back the capacity limits, just as we did for, outdoor gatherings. We had them at 100, now they're at 25. Indoor gatherings used to be 25, now they're 10. So we're rolling back the limits on how many people can gather, and especially in our banquet halls. We know that places of religious worship are already limited to 1/3 capacity, but we have seen some outbreaks in places where people gather to pray. And sometimes they're doing it in a social setting. They're gathering at someone's home to pray together. And this is a big no-no, folks. This is a big no-no. We can't do that. We can't gather in groups to do these kinds of activities, not during a global pandemic.
So now let's look at the revenue for the city of Mississauga. I know that the federal government has given a lot of money to the city of Mississauga. Provincial government has also tried to help out. You being the mayor of one of the biggest cities in Canada, are you happy with the funding which your city has received?
So we, as the mayors across Canada, the mayors of Ontario, the GTHA mayors, we meet every week to speak. And whatever we do, especially in the GTHA, we try to do it uniformly so it's consistent and applies to everyone, so that the rules in Toronto are the same as the rules in Peel. And we all shared our economic difficulties, our financial challenges. And so we're all facing operating deficits because of the fact that we deferred all our revenues, all our property tax revenue. We provided free transit, for goodness sakes. We stopped all fines and penalties. So all revenues for the cities came to a halt. I was estimating over $100 million deficit, about 107 million. So we immediately looked at how we can curtail our spending, what we could cut. And so we stopped all discretionary spending, stopped. We laid off 2,000 people right away, our part-time people. We closed all our facilities, so we let go all the cultural people that staffed our cultural facilities, our recreation facilities, our arenas, etc. We had a hiring freeze in place. So we found $40 million, which was great. So it reduced our deficit to about $55-60 million. So still a lot. Mm-hmm. And now we were waiting for the federal, the provincial government to announce how much they would give us for our operating deficits. And Mississauga was very fortunate. We received $46 million, $31 million to assist our transit, because we were losing $7.5 million each month with providing free public transit. And of course, people, even though we're charging fares again, people aren't riding the public transit because they're afraid. Right, so we still not
they don't have a work to go to,
or they don't have a job.
Yeah, so they're staying home.
There are people who, correct, and students. Again, some are taking classes online. They're not using public transit. So whatever the reason, transit revenues are down. We received $31 million for our transit and $15 million for our operating deficit. So that's put us in a very good position. We're now only facing a $9 to $10 million deficit. And of course, we have very strong reserves here in Mississauga we may have to tap into. Of course, we're going to look to see where else we can cut. We did a first take on our budget just this week, and we're only proposing a 1% increase to the taxpayer. So that's pretty modest, and that's largely because of infrastructure commitments, union contracts, and that we have to put money aside for interest payment and debt repayment every year. So that's where that 1% goes to. It's critical money.
So Mayor Crombie, we have to go to a short break. Right after, when we come back, we'll discuss a few other issues which are happening in Mississauga as of today. You're watching the Grewalz Show. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the Grewalz Show. Today my guest is Mayor Crombie from City of Mississauga. Mayor Crombie, welcome back.
Gurunderji.
As we've been discussing about the 1% increase you just mentioned, City of Mississauga has been a city which never raised taxes for, I think, close to 40 years. So you think if your council brings in the increase of taxes, will that affect you or your council in the next elections?
No, absolutely not. So let me put that myth to rest. Actually, there was, I think, 3 or 4 years where we did not increase taxes. But we did that because we had development charges that exceeded the amount of taxes that we were expecting. It was a time of huge growth in our city. So our revenue came from our development charges, not from our tax base. And so we didn't need to ask the people to provide property tax revenue for the city. But those days are have changed. Those days are part of our history, not part of our present. So we continue always to be very conservative and very fiscally responsible here in Mississauga. And believe me, we're only asking the bare minimum from our residents. It is so that we continue with the infrastructure projects that are on the books and need to continue so we can give them a world-class city. We need to make debt payments and interest payments. And finally, we have union contracts that have to be honored. Of course, we have essential workers on our payroll that include firefighters, emergency service workers, police, transit drivers, etc. These people have contracts, and of course we have to continue to pay them to provide the programs and services that our residents have grown to not only to want, but also they are a minimum requirement of any city, and we have to follow some provincial guidelines on levels of service, particularly with fire and emergency services, policing, etc. So we are asking the bare minimum from our residents this year. We understand it's a very, very difficult year for everyone, but in order to ensure that we can continue to provide basic services like fire and emergency services, policing, transit drivers, etc., continue to make the debt payments and interest payments on our debts, and continue with the infrastructure programs to keep people working and keep our city growing, that is the basic minimum we have to charge this year.
So now there's another problem which is happening in Mississauga as we speak, that there's a mice infestation going on. Where did these creatures come out of the woods? Like, everything's been so quiet with the weather, with people not going outside. So where are all these rats and mice coming into the houses?
So the easy answer is construction. They, of course, live under the ground and they're very happy. And what attracts rats is food being present. So if you compost or leave your garbage out, or, behind the malls, they have those big bins. If there is a garbage overflowing, it will attract rats. But the other problem is construction. And when we burrow into the ground, their natural habitats are disturbed and they come to the surface. And this is what we're seeing in the Applewood Heights and Applewood Acres area. And we see it in Meadowvale. I mean, to be honest with you, they are everywhere, but they do appear when there is a lot of construction occurring, and that's what we're seeing in the Applewood area. So yesterday at the Region of Peel, where we voted to prepare a pilot program next year to assist people, but right now we have put $500,000 aside, $500,000 aside, so that people who have, had to purchase the services of exterminators or rodent specialists to help extract some of these rodents from their homes, they can be rebated. So they can be, if they have the proper receipts, we will rebate them up to $200. So that is in the interim until the pilot project is confirmed and defined, and we'll kick it off next year. But we understand there's a problem. I mean, let's be honest, they are everywhere, certainly in Brampton and Caledon as well, all along the lake as well. But particularly when we have the large construction projects that burrow deep into the ground, their natural habitats become disturbed and then they come to the surface. And that's what we were seeing.
Now, another one big issue which came into light at the city was the city bylaw for noise. Now, as we all understand that the city bylaw for noise has been amended a couple times. Can you tell me what's the background of those amendments?
So it is a long time since we've looked at the noise bylaw, and we thought it was a time for a refresh. And certainly everyone's been hearing the loud noises that the mufflers are making and audio sounds from different places. And it's just time to bring it up to current standards and, current community expectations, to be honest. So we were about to pass it, and then we realized that because of COVID, there hadn't been sufficient community consultation. There were community groups and resident associations that wanted to have input into the noise bylaw. And we said, let's put the brakes on this until we can better consult with the community and the community groups, let them have their say and make whatever amendments are necessary, and we'll reintroduce it later next year. So there is still a consultation process going on so that people can be heard with respect to changes in the noise bylaw, and whether we'll, limit the hours that you can make noise, whether it's your leaf blower, it's construction noise, whether it's the decibel level, whatever it might be. You take a look at the proposals, and you can also have your say to our noise bylaw.
But this will only happen after COVID is outside of our world, and then we are all back to normal at City Hall?
Well, business is going on as usual in Mississauga. Even day one of COVID, we continue to meet virtually. We were holding WebEx and Zoom calls virtually. We kept our council meetings going. So for us, it was business as usual. But when you have these reports like the noise bylaw come forward, and even though it's business as usual for us, I think the residents didn't feel that they had been consulted sufficiently. And so we put the brakes on it and are allowing them the opportunity to have their input. And we will bring it back, not necessarily after COVID, but next year when more community consultation has been completed.
Now, coming down to Thanksgiving weekend, what's your message to the general public watching our show?
Certainly, Thanksgiving is a wonderful time normally for families to gather, extended families. This year, we've asked that people celebrate differently. We ask that you celebrate only with your immediate family, the people you live with, and your essential support workers. It's very vital given the rise of COVID transmission in our community. And also, it's a time to be thankful for what we have. You know, we are all blessed. Notwithstanding, we're living in turbulent times in a pandemic. There are many reasons to be grateful. Many of us still have our jobs and are working towards making our communities a better place. We have beautiful families. We live in a wonderful city, province, and country. There's a lot to be grateful for. Notwithstanding, there are still people in our community who have lost their jobs, and they are more vulnerable at this time. We see that food bank usage has increased 138%. Imagine, during COVID. And so we're asking people that if you can, please donate to the food bank. The campaign for the food bank continues until October 18th, but they're always happy to accept your donation. It doesn't matter when it is. So certainly, we're looking to raise $250,000 and 170,000 pounds of food. So the food, non-perishable items, can be dropped off at fire stations, at grocery stores, or at the food bank. And we're very grateful for whatever you may contribute. And I always ask people to take a picture of themselves donating the food, put it on social media, and to challenge their 5 friends to do the same. But as well, the food bank knows well what their needs are. And if you could contribute $5, $10, $20, whatever you could afford, even $100, if you can afford it, to the food bank, you can make a donation online. The MississaugaFoodBank.org. It would go a long way to feeding the hungry neighbors in our community. Your neighbors, some of them will be hungry this Thanksgiving, and in this time when we're giving thanks, let's make sure everyone has a Thanksgiving meal. And for every $1, it will provide 2 meals for our hungry neighbors. So please be generous this Thanksgiving season. And even after the Thanksgiving weekend, we're still taking collections until the end of the month. So please be generous this Thanksgiving.
Well, thank you for being on our show, Mayor Crombie, and we will welcome you back anytime again with new updates, new discussion on issues happening in Mississauga. Anything else you want to add at the end?
Just thank you. Please, everyone, be careful. Practice the core 4, which means wearing your face covering. Please keep a safe distance from people. Don't let them cough or sneeze or breathe on you. Please keep a safe distance. Wash your hands regularly. Use hand sanitizer. And above all else, don't gather in groups. This is not the time to socialize. This is not the time to book up your social calendar. Immediate family only, not your extended family. Not the family down the street or in the next town, your immediate family, please. This is how it's passing along. This is how the virus is being transmitted, through social contact, through community transmission. So please limit your social gatherings. Thank you. Sat Sri Akal. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you for watching the Grewalz Show. Next time, we'll have another guest on our show. We'll ask your questions to our invited guest and get their answers for you. Keep on watching the Grewalz Show on YouTube, Facebook, Punjab Star. Sat Sri Akal.